I've gotten some great reactions from people seeing the original drawing of the AC/DC logo, which is the blueprint for what the actual artwork is. So that's been kind of fun lately for me, is digging up these old drawings and posting them.
Vernomatic Productions.
Are you ready?
Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are gold. We are gold.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC.
It's getting nice and heavy.
Now, welcome our hosts, John the Vernomatic Verno, and direct from New Jersey, Metal Walt.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, and staying healthy. Tonight's episode, Metal Walt sits down with graphic designer Gerard Huerta. You may not recognize the name, but you definitely know his work. This is the guy behind that classic AC/DC logo, Boston, Blue Öyster Cult, Ted Nugent, all those 70s arena rock bands. Metal Walt and Gerard talk about how these logos came together, what the process was like back then, and how this stuff turned into lasting symbols in rock and pop culture. He's done work tied to HBO, Time Magazine, People Magazine, and even Swiss Army. See, the wild part is, a lot of these now iconic designs started out as just another job that came across his desk. You got to remember, this was 40, 50, even 55 years ago. Pre-computers, pre-email, a lot of this work was done by hand. It's a really cool perspective on a side of the music world and even the TV and film world that we don't usually talk about. This is a good one. Metal Walt, Gerard Huerta, I'm the Vernomatic, and this is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Gerard, great to have you on. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on. I think this is going to be an awesome discussion, unique because you come at like the rock and metal piece from a slightly different angle. A lot of times we're talking to artists about promoting product and tours and things of that nature, but never do we really get behind the scenes, behind how some of these things happen. So maybe off the bat, I would say our listeners may not know you by name, but they definitely know your work. So when did your fascination with lettering and logo design start, and how'd you get into this business?
Okay. When I was little, I used to draw a lot. That was sort of my thing. And I went to art school, Art Center College of Design, and I found that in lettering class, I seemed to excel more than others. Most people hated lettering. It was too nitsy, too fine-tuned. I loved all that. I really enjoyed the drawing of letters, the spacing of letters, the final execution of it. So being an advertising major and getting towards the end of school, I was told I wasn't going to graduate because I had no ads in my portfolio. I had all this lettering. So I had a wonderful teacher, Mel Sant, who went to bat for me and got me graduated with distinction, and it all worked out. So I got married, moved to New York, and it took me about 2 months to get a job. New York was going broke. It was not a great time to be there. But I did get hired by John Berg at CBS as an album cover designer. Now, it didn't require me to be a lettering designer, but I think it was a bonus for him because he loved the West Coast look, and I had a little bit of that. And of course, I used every opportunity I could to draw logos and lettering and whatever on albums. So that was kind of my job. I would just spend a lot of time drawing letters because I enjoyed doing it. And I could draw letters better than I could draw people or anything else. So.
Okay.
So
that's an interesting thing. So let's say, what years were you at CBS Records? And I mean, I'm assuming this is in the heyday of the 70s. And, what was that environment like? And, how did that help influence you working in that industry?
Okay. I went to CBS in September of 1974 I only stayed there a year and 4 months. I started my own business in January of '76, um, mainly because I wanted to work for other people too. I was getting calls from other record companies, from magazines, from advertising people who would see these covers or see these logos and would call me for work. And because most of my day was occupied at CBS, I'd have to use the nights to do any freelance work. And I knew if I left CBS, they would continue using me, which they did. In fact, I feel like they used me even more as an artist after I left. So I got to do more illustrative covers and, for example, the Chicago thumbprint. It was Chicago 14. One of the albums was a giant thumbprint with the Chicago logo in it. It continued on, which was great. The work continued on. I had a great relationship with John Berg, Ed Lee, Teresa Alfieri, Paula Scher, Andy Engel, all these people that worked there.
Yeah. So maybe like when you got started, I mean, take us through like a process, right? Like, okay, you're working at CBS or Arista or a freelancer, a band, or let's say somebody from the firm, a marketing company, or somebody says, hey,
okay,
Gerard, we need you to design something for AC/DC, Ted Nugent,
okay,
Chicago, whatever. How does that go down? Where do you get started in the creative mindset?
Okay. A little bit of background. I never met any of the groups or any of the artists. Okay. Part of that, if you look at a lot of the work that I did, it was early on in the careers of these people. I was in my 20s. They were in their 20s. I worked on the first AC/DC album, which was High Voltage. I did lettering for that. And then the second one here in the United States was Let There Be Rock. They were really not involved that much in the cover because they were new artists. And the point of the record company is to sell as many records as possible. So they would determine what the image was, what it was going to look like. It was only people like Barbra Streisand and Paul Simon who really got control of what the album cover was going to look like. There were enough art directors and creative people that would guide the album. So usually what would happen is I would have a discussion with the art director, and I would go back to my drawing board. I would do maybe 3 sketches. He would pick one. I would do finished artwork, and voila, it would appear on the album. Now, realize that when I was doing these things, I had no clue 50 years later I would be talking about them because they were jobs. They were just jobs that kind of came and went. They were part of the process of having a career. You do a job, you move on. And I suppose it's like any other creative business where maybe an actor does a movie and moves on. And then all of a sudden that movie takes off, and now we're watching it, 25 years later, 30 years later. I see there's a big celebration of Back to the Future's 40th anniversary. Who would know that would occur? It's pretty great that people, they're inspired by these things and they keep it alive. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of these logos. They've gone from being sort of decorations on an album cover to being a little bit of our pop culture.
Absolutely. I mean, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but I mean, you're part of this legacy like this, that's going to go on forever. I mean, again, let's stay on the AC/DC topic, but I mean, this is arguably one of the most recognizable logos in history. Forget music, right? I mean, what was the creative brief behind this, or like, how did that one? Do you remember anything from, like, was it that somebody said, hey, they just want this to be the letters? Like, where did the whole bolt come there?
Well, that existed. They had a lightning bolt before I ever even got involved in it. If you look at the first album I worked on, it was a very different kind of configuration. We had an AC/DC sort of moving towards the center with a lightning bolt and High Voltage around it, made out of lightning bolt lettering. when the second one came along, that was really kind of a reaction to the photograph and the title, which was "Let There Be Rock." It was sort of a religious quote, and Bob Defford had this kind of cool photograph with this sky, this sort of ominous sky, and the logo was going to sit, or letter was going to sit right up there. So I, using the influence of Gutenberg Bible kind of for letters, sort of used that that idea as a basis for drawing these letter forms. So I probably did 3 sketches. One was picked. I did color artwork for it, and that was pretty much it. I moved on to whatever was next. Coincidentally, that coincided at the same time I did 4 other letters, which were the letters TIME for Time Magazine, which was their masthead for about 15 or 16 years. So you can see just in that difference of letter forms how you design for what's appropriate for for what you're doing. And AC/DC felt appropriate for that. Time Magazine felt appropriate for that.
Did you ever, I mean, I don't know if you're a fan of this kind of music, but did you ever, I know you said you didn't interact with the band, but, did you ever, I mean, how does that make you feel? Like, let's say you go see an AC/DC concert, or you're shopping in your local Target, or maybe your kids are coming home with these shirts on, or you see kids in the schoolrooms and stuff like that, and you go, oh my God, that's me right there.
It's a good feeling. It's kind of cool. I mean, I get that with a lot of things. I mean, I've worked on a lot of logos, a lot of things that still, things like HBO. Those letters they still exist, and so it's a cool feeling to be part of something that continues. I guess is sort of my point, because another sort of cool thing for me was I got involved with Swiss Army, designing watch dials and drawing numbers and tick marks and hands. And what was cool about that is that was a permanent installation of my artwork. So of course still wear Swiss Army watches. I don't know if you can see that, but
sure thing.
But it's a cool thing because those things exist. They keep existing, I guess, is the point. So I'm thrilled. When I see an AC/DC thing, I'm on a shirt, I go, well, that's cool. That's it's still around. It's but again, I'm not fooling myself saying it's because of the graphic. The band has promoted themselves, and it just happens to be their identifier for their music, their graphic identifier. So you see the logo, you think of the music, and you think of them.
Sure.
So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's funny. I was spoke to guitarist Steve Morse from the Dixie Dregs, Deep Purple, Kansas recently. Yeah, and I posed a question to him, and I said, Steve, you look at your online resume, and you've played on hundreds of albums and plus singles. I said, did you ever kind of count like what you've done? And he said, similar answer to you, Gerard. He said, you know what? He goes, it's kind of like eating. He goes, you get up every day, you eat your 3 meals, and you move on. He goes, but you don't really count. It's just part of what you do when you're in your job. And I suppose that parallel can be made to you as well.
Well, yeah, it's true, because once the job is invoiced or actually paid for, you do move on. You've concluded that aspect of that, whatever hours of your life that consumed. So it's always a little bit fascinating to see these things kind of jump at you, in the future. It's very cool. So I don't know. It's been a really cool career. It's been a great career. One of the things that I did besides saving all my artwork is I saved all my drawings, and I've been posting a lot of the drawings on Instagram and Facebook, because nobody really draws anymore. Everybody's sitting in front of a computer, and most of these things for about half of my career were at a drawing board. You sit at a drawing board, you draw it up, you ink it, or you color it, or you airbrush it, or you do whatever you need to do to create the finished artwork. But I've gotten some great reactions from people seeing the original drawing of the AC/DC logo, which is the blueprint for what the actual artwork is. So that's been kind of fun lately for me, is digging up these old drawings and posting them.
Yeah, well, of course, because we are in a digital age. I mean, and I'm sure, if you're still active in design, like the digital tools have changed, kind of the workflow. And, there might be some positives to that enhance creativity, but there might be limits to it as well. But like, what does your designer brain prefer? Like when you think about product, let's say music, if you're designing something now, do you think vinyl, CD, digital streaming? Like, where does your brain go when you have to design something now?
It usually goes to the phone. The phone is what everybody uses. It's what they look at, and the screen is small. So you think in terms of the translation of whatever that graphic is into some tiny little screen grab. And that has become more and more sort of the determining factor of how you produce a logo or a mark or an image for somebody. It's the phone has become the sort of form of communication. I mean, I'm sitting here with this big 27-inch screen looking at, doing artwork and everything, but, I've got to reduce it down and take a look at what's going to happen when, it's about an inch and a half across, and see what happens. So that's changed a lot about how I perceive what I do, that part of the communication. But as far as the digital thing, I would never give up my Mac. I mean, I love, the old days of ink and pens and airbrush and paints and all that stuff. I mean, this is just so much cleaner and so much nicer and so much. I don't have to do a really tight drawing. I can do a very loose drawing. And of course, everything still starts that way. Everything starts at the drawing board. I don't go to a computer until I have a fairly good idea of what's going to happen when I scan this, this pencil into the computer.
So, Gerard, I definitely want to circle back to some of the other bands, but maybe before we wrap this part of it, are you still active designing in the music industry?
Yeah, I am. I seem to get contacted by bands who are sort of in that 70s world. And I would say probably in the last 5 years, I've probably done maybe 10 band logos, which is a lot for somebody who's been out of the record business for, 30 years. I mean, they managed to dig me up and they like the style. And so that's, it's kind of nice. So
what are some do you remember some of the bands?
There's Cardboard Cowboy. There's I'd have to pull up my list here of all those things because I don't follow them, so I don't keep track of them. But there's been quite a few that they're graphically very sophisticated, and it's nice. Let's go to the source. Let's go to the person who can give us what we want, and that's kind of great. So
yeah. Cool. That's very cool stuff. So, I mean, circling back, I wanted to ask you about a few of the other bands in the rock and the hard rock arena. Boston comes to mind, right? I mean, Boston's typography and album visuals are always pretty unique. And, I think as the average fan thinks about, they think about the logo, but it's always centered around the whole spaceship concept. So maybe comment about that when that whole thing went down. And I know you said you didn't interact with the bands themselves, but the leader of that band, Tom Schultz, he's always been a perfectionist, down to his music, to the lighting, to, going out on tour. And I know he had an influence in this. So maybe just comment a little bit about that experience with the Boston piece.
What I recall, I mean, remember, this has been a long time ago. Yeah. What I recall is Paula Scheer was the art director on that. And I know she worked with the manager. I don't remember his name, but she hired Roger Hyson, an airbrush artist, to do the cover. And Roger and I shared an office for 25 years. We went to school together, and we had a kind of wonderful relationship, and we did a lot of collaborations and things. And this was one of those collaborations, but I was kind of on the tail end of it, where they sort of came up with the concept. I wasn't involved in the idea of it. My job was to design a word, Boston, and wrap it around this biggest guitar in the universe. I had to draw that up and do a trace down tissue and rub it down, and then Roger painted everything. I didn't get involved in the color work or anything. I did get involved later, sort of flattening it out and doing sort of a formal version of it that was not sort of wrapped on the guitar. But that was really all I kind of remember about it.
Okay.
Again, it was one of those, oh, who are these guys? It's a job. You do the job, and then suddenly, it grows and grows and grows and grows. And now it seems that everyone knows who Boston is. They know the music. It's a phenomenon. It's really quite incredible when you think about it. And I was just sort of a small piece of that,
Right. But it's an important piece, and it's a piece that doesn't get, maybe it's not the sexy piece, right? We think of, right? But it's an important piece and an interesting piece.
Yeah.
So moving along to a band like Blue Oyster Cult, right? They've always had these sci-fi rock kind of themes to them, and their album titles were a little weird and mysterious, and their symbolism and lettering, they were a little bit out there at the time. So maybe what do you remember from that period? The symbolism, creative inspirations.
A few things. First of all, it was a live album. I was not familiar with them, but John Berg, my art director, my boss, he had photographed this church. It's somewhere in the New Canaan, New York line kind of area. It's just a little cute little church, but he had photographed this limousine in front of it, and it was just this very disturbing photograph. It's all distorted, and he combined it with an ominous sky that was not part of the photo. This was added into what we used to call a dye transfer. A dye transfer is a photographic print, where a high quality photographic print where they could add things and change things. And then a fellow named Howard Carricker, retouched it all together. He added the Blue Oyster Cult flag. John came to me and he said, I want you to put some lettering in this. We need, we got to put Blue Oyster Cult on your feet or on your knees. So I thought about it again. This goes back before AC/DC. And I thought, well, this is sort of a church kind of a related thing. I'll use the Gutenberg Bible influence for the letter forms, but we'll do a little twist on it and do maybe a car mark. So it's made out of stainless steel or chrome, more stainless steel. So that's where that came from, and it started slowly becoming sort of the look for heavy metal letters. That was kind of I think it was kind of the source of it, because I sort of thought in terms of Karmark and Gutenberg Bible, but it looks so ominous, like the photograph looked ominous. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so we did that, and there was money spent on the inside, a big collage. So by the time we got to the back cover, we had no money left. So John said, well, maybe you could hold up a Bible, put the credits in the Bible, we'll do something. And what we ended up doing, I put on some motorcycle gloves, and we went to the photo studio. We projected that ominous sky on the wall, and I held up this Bible with photostats in it with all the credits, and Don Hunstein, the photographer, photographed it, and that was our back cover. So it was done very cheaply but effectively.
Well, that's a fascinating story, and just awesome that you shared that. I got to go pull that one out and look at that one now. So now moving on to somebody like Ted Nugent, right? Uncle Ted, I mean, especially in the 70s, he was a madman, right? But, I think the logo to me always represented his wild, energetic vibe. But at the same token, it kind of looks like an autograph, like his signature. So maybe in a general sense or specific to Ted, how did you kind of translate personality into lettering, if that opportunity
again,
arose?
I remember at the time, this was 1975, so this is 50 years ago. I was not that aware of Ted Nugent, but there was this photograph that was decided that was going to be the cover. Teresa Alfieri, who was the art director, she put it on the cover and she left a space there. And she said, can you put some lettering on this, do something that might go with it? And so my initial thought was, well, he's obviously moving. It's kind of out of focus and sort of a little bit of movement to it. So I just started drawing like this. I just started, writing his name, drawing his name, and then tightening it up, and then trying to maintain that sort of natural, feel of it moving. I tightened it up and just basically came up with that lettering, which seemed successful. So we went on to use it for, Intensity in 10 Cities and State of Shock. And I don't know, there were about 4 or 5 that I worked on that were part of that whole series of Ted Nugent's artwork. And again, it was sort of using it as a corporate identity, that it would be recognizable to people if they see a new album, they're already familiar with the name Ted Nugent and the way it's done, and then we would do the album title in the same style. But again, I'm trying to think back to having done it. Again, it was just, well, we got to make this cover look good. What do we do? And that it just sort of came out of a feeling of what that photograph was.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking in general, Gerard, I mean, you're talking about pressures, like in the industry at that time. Were there pressures like where something was dropped on your desk and it's like, hey, Gerard, you got to do this overnight, or let's say stuff where there was some conflict maybe between your direction and the art director and maybe, I don't know, the record label, whoever? Was there ever situations where it became unbearable but you still had to deliver something?
Not in the record business, surprisingly enough. I remember times when maybe the illustration didn't come in, or we were using an outside illustrator, and he wasn't done. Which is very typical in the world of illustration, especially in those days when they were very realistic and complicated. And, CBS would just delay it. So they would just, they would have no problem just delaying, the release date. So I never felt the pressure from the record business to produce, under fire. That came more in terms of magazines. I worked with Time Magazine with Walter Bernard and Rudy Hoagland, and I would get a call from them on a Friday at 11 o'clock, and I would have to do some cover lettering and have it in the messenger's van by 5 o'clock. So I had 6 hours to draw it up, fax it over, get it approved, ink it, clean it up, flap it, and send it out. And I went a long time doing that, and it was great training. It was really great training to be able to produce things fast. Magazines are different because they are under a deadline. They have a printing deadline. The record business didn't really have those kinds of deadlines, at least when I was working there.
Okay. Yeah, you would almost think it would be the other way if they have a release date planned, even if it's 6 months out, right? You would sort of work backwards. But it's interesting to know kind of what goes behind the scenes. So, Gerard, in wrapping up, let's say your musical part, because I do want to touch a bit about your other part of your career. I mean, there's so many. We could be here for hours. Foreigner, Chicago, Rick Derringer, Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson. any of those your favorites, or anything you want to call out that those would be maybe some of the most rewarding pieces of your career?
The Chicago thing is interesting because it's actually part of the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, which is really cool for me. The only thing about it is I didn't design the Chicago logo. It was designed by Nick Fasciano when he worked at CBS. So it was a case where I actually took somebody else's lettering and created a piece of artwork, which I can't think of any other time I actually did that. It was one of the few times that has happened. But I like the way the artwork came out. It was very, very cool. The idea of a thumbprint and a logo. I don't know. I love all of them. The Willie Nelson Live, and Family Live, and Charlie Daniels, and they were all. I think for me, it was always sort of a challenge to come up with something that looked different than what I had done before. And I think when you look at the variety of things, or even if you look at my website and look at the portfolio of work, I'm very proud of the fact that it doesn't look like one person did this. That it could have been, there could be 50 different guys in this portfolio because all the work looks different, and I'm kind of proud of that. I don't lock into a style of work. I maybe lock into many styles of work, many different things. I think that, including, doing things in black and white, very flat, and doing things in color that are very dimensional. So I think the variety of all those record albums, I think is what I'm most proud of, I think.
Well,
Okay. And you mentioned that, you are in this permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art, but you also have a vintage guitar art as part of the exhibit at the National Guitar Museum. What's that all about?
Okay. That started back around 2009. And if you recall, I don't know what you were doing in 2009. My career was going pretty darn good. And then we had a mortgage crisis. And then my clients started getting laid off. A person at Pepsi got laid off, a person here got laid off. And I was losing business because those were chunks of business of people who would continually use you. So I would come into work in the morning with nothing to do. And one of the things that I always wanted to do, because I love vintage guitars, I have played guitar since I was 13. I thought it'd be really fun to do a vintage guitar collection. Very much like when I was a youngster, I would go to Beach Music Center in Huntington Beach and look at these beautiful guitars in the 60s with a sign that said "Do not touch," but they were just sparkling and beautiful. And what I wanted to do is sort of do a series of what I remember these vintage guitars, what they look like when they were brand new. So I just started doing them. And when I would get some time in between jobs and stuff, I would jump back on, then I'd do another one. So I ended up with I've got about 27 that I've done of different vintage guitars. And 8 of them are traveling with the National Guitar Museum. They're printed up exact size, full size, so they look like a guitar hanging on a wall in a frame. And, it was just sort of a labor of love. It was just something that, I just enjoyed doing. And I haven't gotten into selling prints or doing that because now that's a whole other. Yeah. I did it because I enjoyed it. I don't enjoy the fulfillment part of it. So
sure.
Anyway,
sure.
But yeah, they're a fun thing to do, something fun to do, and an experiment with surfaces. I'm doing them all digitally in Adobe Illustrator in vector form, so it's not Photoshop. It's really about drawing and getting surfaces to look the way you want to in a vector artwork, which is it's difficult, but it's a good challenge for me.
Okay. Okay.
Keeps,
Sure.
keeps
All
me in
right.
the game.
Sure, absolutely. So these are awesome stories, Gerard. You talked a little bit about Time Magazine, working in publications, but you go to your website. It's impressive when you see all of the different logos and brands that we're all synonymous with on a day-to-day basis. But you know. You came onto my radar through a family member of mine who's an engineer, and he
Oh,
passed the link on to me about a month ago, where some online guy was trying to debunk the theory about the HBO logo being not centered, and knowing me as a family member, he said, but watch further than that, because I know you're a detail guy, but I know also this guy's into music. But that's what piqued my curiosity about you, which was why I reached out to you. But you think of HBO, Nabisco, Doers, you commented on Swiss Army, Rolling Rock, Pepsi. I mean, just name a few. What were some of these that you were most proud of, or that just stand the test of time?
gee, I don't know. I don't have any super favorites. I mean, I do have a favorite piece of art that I did for Lou Dorsman and then John Berg and Henrietta Kondak, which was the CBS Records Masterworks logo. It's a violin and a French horn and a flute. And Lou Dorsman, he was a really great guy at CBS. He was sort of the head of all of the graphics at CBS. And he had called me in to design this logo, which was going to be a gold sticker that would be put on every classical album in the Masterworks collection. We did that for a while, and it got to be a little bit expensive. So I ended up doing a full color piece of art that would be printed on the album. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because it took so long to do. It's a very complicated piece of artwork. That is one of my favorites, but not necessarily something that anybody would know.
Okay.
I mean, I love seeing People magazine still is around. That's kind of cool. I liked Architectural Digest because it was such a long word, 2 words. And I like the way that came out. They're no longer using it. They just use an A and a D. They don't use the whole word. Mm-hmm. But that was used for quite a while. These things do get sort of recycled in a funny way. Money Magazine, I did a logo for Money Magazine, and then I did it again as a kind of a renewed thing. Same way with the Atlantic Monthly. I did that one twice. They're no longer using it. They're using something else. So a lot of times a new art director will come on the scene and he'll want to change everything. So things get changed around that way, which is good. It's more work for me. I mean, it's,
Sure.
you're getting another job and you're changing it. Again, favorites, I don't know. I mean, if you said to me, and I always think about this because I don't have any tattoos, and people say, why don't you get a tattoo? Get a tattoo. Well, if you said pick one thing you'd want tattooed on your body that you've done, I couldn't do it because I first of all, I don't think I could live with the graphic permanently, so I don't want it. So I have no tattoos because I don't have any interest in having a graphic on my body that I got to live with, because it's a constant change. I mean, every day is a new job. I recently redid a logo for there's a guy in Connecticut who he has a tattoo supply company, Tommy's, and he has a collection of color, all kinds of tattoo colors, inks, tons of different colors of inks. And I did his logos for that. And I just redid his logo for his tattoo convention, which just happened.
Okay.
And that was a fun thing because that's a whole subculture that's really interesting to me. Although I don't want to have anything. I love doing the graphics for it. I don't want to have any ink on me, but that that's sort of like still staying in the game for me. Is
Sure.
You have all these people with tattoos, and I'm working on this tattoo convention logo. So at 73 years old, I feel, well, that's kind of cool. I'm still in it.
Sure. Well, just think, it's funny. You're cracking me up because it's funny. Like, can you imagine how many fans around the world have the AC/DC logo on their body? That might be your next thing. You could go seek people to send them into your website. Send me my logo I designed and show me your art. Probably get thousands of entries.
Well, I have an image with all of these AC/DC tattoos I've collected.
Okay.
And I'll have to show it to you. I don't know if you could see my screen, but anyway, it's pretty incredible that, I mean, on their head, on their stomach. Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is Google AC/DC tattoo, and they just all come up. It's pretty incredible.
That's awesome. Now, Gerard, before I let you go, you did some design work for the Super Bowl for MSG Network. You've done work in film and television. What are the challenges behind that? Like designing for, let's say, the visual culture on a screen versus like a physical product?
Most of those that I'm thinking of were done pre-computer. So for example, the Super Bowl, Roger Heisen and I worked on the Super Bowl poster for 1994. They don't usually repeat artists, but I have managed to work on a couple of logos, a few logos. And we work with a gentleman called Brad Jansen. And the interesting thing, and nobody really realizes this, they have to way ahead of time do artwork for Super Bowl, for Breeders' Cup, for a lot of these, events, not knowing what's going to happen. So in the case of the Super Bowl, the only thing we have is the place. We don't know who's playing. We really don't have anything. So you have to create this theme art kind of out of where's the location. In our case, it was Atlanta. And so that became sort of the imagery for that particular thing. There was another, this is kind of a sad story. When we did the Breeders' Cup logo, we had included a skyline in the artwork, which included the Twin Towers. And the Breeders' Cup ran in November. The Twin Towers was 2 months before. So there was no time to revise that or change anything because everything had been printed. So, you run into funny situations. I'll give you another funny story. We used to work for the Ringling Brothers. They had a beautiful program, big program, front and back. Roger and I would work on it together. Roger would do the illustration, I would do all the lettering. And there was a case where they featured the Chipperfield Tigers, and it was two guys, and they're illustrated on it with the Tigers, big tiger in the middle. And that was a deadline job. We had only sort of the time between Christmas and New Year's to do this. Well, I pick up the New York Times and I see that one of the Chipperfields was attacked by one of the tigers. And so we got a call and we had to patch the artwork and change it and put some baby elephants in there because this poor guy was mauled, and his brother went over and shot the tiger. I mean, it was a whole rigmarole. I mean, it was really, really crazy. But the net effect on us is here we had between Christmas and New Year's to get this thing out. And now we got to rush it through and, change the artwork, cut, back in the old days, we had to cut the artwork all out and patch it and replace it. It was a whole thing. But so there's there's stories.
Yeah. Well, you've shared a lot of them today, Gerard. This has been amazing stuff. You got me hooked. And what I think is amazing is you're such a humble guy. And, to you, it's just all part of a good day's work. So where can viewers learn about you? Give us your socials.
Well, I'm on Facebook. It's under my name, Gerard Huerta. Instagram, same thing, all one word, Gerard Huerta. Let's see, what else do I have going here? I don't really do any of the tweeting, any of that stuff. I do post on Instagram. I have been posting a lot of drawings. I have a lot of album covers in my gallery. A lot of artwork that's not on my website that's in the gallery and Instagram. So Instagram's a good place to go, I think. Facebook's a good place to go too. It's kind of all there. And then my website, which is myname.com. So.
Okay. This is great. We'll make sure to have all of these posted when we release the episode. So, Gerard, I really appreciate your time today. It's been awesome stories and a unique piece of music history for us and the listeners, and I'm glad that you shared it.
Well, thank you.
I wish you well. You're welcome. And we look forward to speaking to you again. And for our fans, enjoy it. Head over to GerardHuerta.com. And again, you can find his biography there, some information on him, and links to all his socials. So, Gerard, thanks for your time again today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Metal for Life.
Thank you for listening to Metal Mayhem ROC. Check out our website at metalmayhemroc.com for information on podcasts, archives, links to all our live radio shows, and all sorts of info. Please like, follow, and share with everyone, even your non-metal friends. And always remember to keep it heavy.